Yeah, a very short introduction to me as myself as a person. Patrick from Veen. I'm biologist, behavioral biologist, and I started to study 25 years ago biology. And after my study, I really couldn't find a job in that area, so I had to look for another job, and I found a job at an insurance company. And I thought, okay, after a few years, I thought this is the world to make a career. I see a few people agree to that, insurance company, perfect companies to work for. But that was also an area where I always was surprised about the behavior of my colleagues. So what are we going to do? We are going to study primates. And this was what I told the students this afternoon also. The reason I think it's important to study behavior is that Stephen Covey said once, if you want to have influence on behavior of people, the first thing you should do is understand the behavior. And that's exactly the reason we study behavior of primates. We try to understand a little bit better why we as humans behave in certain situations. And when you understand how people behave, that's the moment that you can think about how can I have influence on behavior. And as a biologist, I always say, okay, you have to understand it, but you have also to observe it and to study it. So we always start with observing, studying behavior, then you can start to understand the behavior, and from that perspective, you can start to have influence on behavior. And the strange thing I see in a lot of organizations coming to us in the zoo is that most organizations are only talking about solving the problem. We want a solution. We do not want to discuss what is causing the problem. No, we just want a solution for the problem. And I think that's the wrong approach. The first thing you should do when you talk about behavior, try to understand what is going on. Why is this problem caused? What are the causes of a problem? And therefore, I try tonight to explain you a few examples or share a few best cases we had the last 10 years with us in the zoo. I think what is very important is just to explain why we are going to look in the mirror. And one of the resemblance and one of the similarities with humans and primates is that humans can recognize themselves in a mirror. And that starts around the age of 18 months, 24 months. From that age on, you or humans can start to recognize themselves in a mirror. And that's the moment also where all the problems start. Because if you can recognize yourself, you know exactly what others are seeing. You know exactly what the perspective of others are. If you do exactly the same experiment with, for example, a rhesus macaque, they can't recognize themselves. They just look into the mirror, see only another primate, but don't realize that's me. When you do exactly the same experiment with a chimpanzee, you get a completely different picture. A chimpanzee starts to experiment, starts to figure out, and suddenly a chimpanzee recognizes himself and thinks, okay, that's me. It has to be me because he acts exactly the same. And really, if a chimpanzee recognizes himself, then you have a very dangerous animal. Let me just give you the first example. That's about cooperation. 3 years ago, a company called me and they said, okay, we have a problem. We have an executive team, but they are not functioning as a team. 7 men, nice people, communicating very well, but it's not functioning as a team. I said, okay, they can come into the zoo. And it was Monday morning, together with my colleague, we were going to pick them up at the zoo entrance, and we came there, and there were 7 men, and they knew they hadn't seen each other for 2 weeks, they hadn't spoken to each other, or at least not live. And what they were doing, they stood like this. I don't know what they were doing, texting or sending emails, but that was their behavior, what I was seeing. And maybe they were sending emails to each other, that was very well possible. But we said, okay, you come into the zoo. We went into the zoo, we did a workshop the whole day. And what, to our surprise, every time happened when they had a few minutes off, that we didn't have a program, lunch, coffee breaks, they grabbed their cell phone and started to do their email. Or they grabbed their laptop and did their laptop. There was no communication between the members of that team. Something very smart or very small. Because never anybody had told them, You need to spend time with each other. It's so simple. But we could really, because we had observed him, we could explain it to him. And it was one of the reasons we thought, okay, this is a very interesting issue. What is the influence of relationships on cooperation? And that's the reason we started to do a few experiments. And this is one of the experiments we are working on. We just have a piece of wood, we have wheels underneath it, and we have just a rope on it. And to get access to the food which is on this wood, two chimpanzees have to cooperate. They just have to pull both at one side of a string. So you need cooperation to get access to the food. That's fine. That's a very easy assignment. It's an old experiment, done many times. So we thought, okay, we are going to do that all. So the chimps are sitting next to each other. It's impossible that one just coordinates both ends of the rope, so they really have to cooperate with each other. So we started to do that experiment. It was very simple, was very successful. Chimpanzees learned that within a few minutes. And interesting is, if there is only one chimpanzee inside, they run outside immediately to pull one of the other chimpanzees inside to help them to pull the rope so they get access to the food. That's cooperation.
You spoke about spending time together.
Yeah.
In the human context, are you advocating that is not work-related time, it's more fun-related time, or does
yeah. Oh, sorry. That's a good question. Yeah, absolutely. But that means it isn't necessary that's time that you spend outside doors. It is also having just a cup of coffee with your colleague. Spending 2 minutes in the morning just discussing what happened in the weekend. And what is happening in a lot of organizations, we don't have the time anymore. This organization which I mentioned, this executive team, they were very effective in their work. But when they had a meeting, they had 2-hour meetings, once in 2 weeks, and they said always, we are very effective. Because we have good meetings, we discuss everything which is on the agenda, but on the other hand, at the moment the meeting was finished, everybody ran away and went back to their own office. And that's the moment where you should say, okay, now we sit together, have just a cup of coffee. Spend just a few minutes to have that discussion. So working on relationships is all these few seconds that you spend together. And we have a few very important conclusions, at least one. And the most important conclusion for me is always that I would say study behavior. Because one of the problems I see, or one of the difficulties in organizations is, most problems are not caused by false system or lacking systems or false procedures or lacking regulation. It's caused by human behavior. And what I always think it's surprising that when we start to solve a problem, the first thing we start to discuss with everybody, okay, we need new procedures. We need a new handbook. We need a better system. And we don't discuss the human behavior. And the first thing we should do is start to discuss the human behavior, because that's the only way to solve problems. And the other thing I want to share with you, I had put 5 take-home messages at home. I would say start to groom each other, build relationships. And grooming is not that you have really to look for fleas or something, it's just pay attention to each other and build trust. That's the start of good cooperation. Make